Sagittarius. When love feels like a cage wrapped in tenderness. The beautiful cage. Not every prison is built from cold steel bars. Some are crafted from tenderness, from thoughtful gestures, from the kind of words that seem to wrap you in warmth. And Sagittarius, you may have found yourself in one of these cages. A place that looked like safety, but slowly, quietly began to press in around you. The most dangerous kind of cage is the one that makes you doubt your own joy. That pairs every step toward expansion with a look that makes you pull back. At first, it's easy to mistake it for love's natural give and take. You feel cared for, even cherished. The concern sounds genuine. The protection feels comforting. But over time something changes. You start to hesitate before sharing your victories. You notice yourself speaking less about your dreams. You find that you're laughing less loudly, as if trying not to wake something sleeping beside you. And perhaps without realizing it, you begin folding your wings so they fit the shape of the love you've been given. Yet true love was never meant to make you smaller. Real connection is not threatened by your growth. It celebrates it. It doesn't just hold space for your expansion. It expands with you. And when you remember this, the walls of the beautiful cage begin to show themselves for what they are. If these words feel familiar, let this be a moment to breathe and step closer to your truth. Like this message so it can reach others. Share it with someone who needs its reminder, and subscribe to walk with me as we explore the ways love can either lift us higher or quietly clip our wings. Gate 1. When you begin to shrink without realizing it. At first it feels harmless, almost noble. You call it compromise, the kind of gentle adjustment every relationship needs. You cancel a trip because he says he'll worry too much if you go. You decide not to mention a new opportunity at work because the last time you did, his mood dropped, and you didn't want to dim the evening. You tell yourself you're being considerate, that love sometimes means bending. And maybe that's true, love does ask for flexibility. But there's a fine line between bending and slowly folding yourself in half until you no longer recognize your own shape. For Sagittarius, this shift can be especially subtle. You're naturally adaptable, able to navigate different people and environments without losing your center. Or so you think. Your optimism allows you to believe these small changes are temporary, that you'll stretch your wings fully again once things settle down. But compromise has a way of becoming habit, and habit has a way of becoming identity. I remember a conversation with a Sagittarius woman named Celine. She used to be the kind of person whose laughter filled a room, whose stories could hold a table of strangers captive. When she met her partner, she felt seen in a way that felt safe, grounding. But slowly, she began to make herself smaller for the sake of keeping things smooth. She stopped going on weekend hikes because he preferred staying home. She let go of her weekly art class because he didn't understand why she needed it. She noticed that whenever she talked about her big dreams, like traveling through South America or starting her own business, his responses grew quieter, less encouraging. It wasn't like he told me not to do things, she said. It was more like, every time I lit up about something I saw him dim. And so I dimmed too. That's how it happens. You don't wake up one day and decide to clip your wings. It's a gradual folding in. The first time you give something up, you tell yourself it's not a big deal. The second time, you remind yourself that love means sacrifice. The third time, you don't even think about it. It's automatic. Until one day, you realize your laughter has grown quieter. You can't remember the last time your eyes sparkled talking about something just for you. The things that once gave you joy have been placed on a high shelf, collecting dust out of reach. Sagittarius, your spirit is wired for expansion. You are at your most alive when you're moving towards something bigger than yourself. Whether it's a literal journey across continents or the internal journey of mastering a new skill, vision, or dream. The moment you start shrinking, you step out of alignment with your true nature. And when you live out of alignment, even the love that felt safe begins to feel heavy. This shrinking often hides behind the language of care. I'm just looking out for you. I don't want you to get hurt. I just miss you when you're away. And while these words may be spoken with sincerity, their impact matters more than the intention. Because if love asks you to give up parts of yourself, to soften your joy, to shelve your dreams, it's no longer a partnership. It's a slow erasure. The danger is that you don't notice the change while it's happening. Like a plant in a too small pot, you grow used to the confines. You keep adjusting your roots instead of breaking the container. But no matter how adaptable you are, You cannot thrive in soil that doesn't give you space. Here's the truth you need to remember. The things that light you up are not indulgences. They are essential to who you are. They are not negotiable extras. They are the air your soul breathes. And any love that requires you to stop breathing is not love that will sustain you. Celine eventually realized that her shrinking wasn't keeping the peace. It was quietly breaking her own heart. One day, she told me, I caught myself turning down a speaking invitation I dreamed about for years, and I didn't even ask myself if I wanted to go. I just thought he won't like it. And that scared me more than anything else. The fact that I was making choices based on his comfort instead of my own truth. When you start to see these moments clearly, you face a choice. Keep shrinking to fit, or risk the discomfort of stretching again. And Sagittarius, you were born to stretch. You were born to test the edges of your sky. You are not here to fit into someone else's frame. You are here to expand until you find the people and places that can hold all of you. So if you feel yourself folding in, laughing less, dreaming less, moving less, pause. Ask yourself, when did I start giving myself away in pieces? And what would it take to call those pieces back? The answer may not be easy, but it will always be worth it. Because the moment you begin to reclaim your space, you will remember something vital. Love that is real does not fear your size, your light, or your reach. It grows with you, not against you. Gate 2. The control behind the smile. Control does not always announce itself in harsh commands or raised voices. Sometimes it wears the softest expressions, speaks in gentle tones, and sits quietly beside you, making you believe it is love. For Sagittarius, this kind of control is the most dangerous because it doesn't feel like control at first, it feels like care. And yet, it can shape your choices, your dreams, and even your sense of self without a single word of don't. It might be the way their eyes cloud over when you talk about something exciting, an unspoken disapproval that leaves you second-guessing whether to bring it up again, or the silence that follows when you share a victory, leaving you wondering if you should tone it down next time. Sometimes it's a sigh, a subtle shift in posture, a pause in conversation that somehow makes you feel you've crossed an invisible line. They never forbid you from flying. They simply make the air thinner each time you try to lift off. I remember a Sagittarius man named Adrian, who once told me about the relationship that quietly caged him. His partner never said don't go when he wanted to travel, but she would say things like, I just don't sleep well when you're away, or I get so lonely without you. She never told him to decline invitations, but when he did go out without her, she would text him just enough times to remind him that she was waiting. Over time, he began choosing to stay home, not because she asked him to, but because the emotional weight of her disappointment became heavier than his own desire to go. This is how control hides behind the smile. It operates in the space between words, shaping your behavior through emotional cues rather than direct demands. And because nothing is explicit, you feel like you can't prove anything is wrong. After all, they never told you what to do. You're making your own choices, aren't you? But Sagittarius, you know the truth. Freedom is not only about the absence of physical barriers, it's about the ability to act without the weight of someone else's comfort constantly on your shoulders. When you start making decisions not because you want to, but because you're managing someone else's feelings, you've stepped into a different kind of cage. This is particularly suffocating for you because your nature is expansive. Your ruling planet, Jupiter, pushes you toward growth, adventure, and truth. You thrive when you're exploring. Physically, intellectually, spiritually. When someone's presence begins to shrink that horizon, even if it's wrapped in affection, your soul starts to ache. And yet, because the control is so subtle, you might find yourself questioning your own judgment. Am I being selfish? Am I overreacting? Maybe this is just what it means to be in love. The hardest part about this kind of control is that it often comes from people who genuinely care about you. Their intent may not be to hold you back. They might just be afraid of losing you, or uncomfortable with the parts of you that they can't contain. But regardless of the reason, the impact is the same. Your light grows dimmer. Not because you've lost it, but because you've been shielding it to make someone else feel safe. Adrian told me that his turning point came one evening when he was offered a spot in an international project, a dream he'd been chasing for years. He came home ready to share the news, but before he could finish his sentence, his partner's face fell. She didn't say no. She didn't even argue. She just went quiet in that way he had come to know so well. And I heard myself say, it's okay, I'll pass on it, Before I even thought about what I wanted, he said. That's when I realized I wasn't making choices for me anymore. I was making them for her comfort. Sagittarius, your light is not meant to be adjusted to suit someone else's eyes. It is meant to blaze, to warm, to inspire. Those who truly love you will stand beside that light, even if it outshines their own. They will not need you to dim in order to feel secure. The truth is, you cannot protect someone from their own insecurities by shrinking yourself. All that does is teach them that your wings are negotiable. And every time you tuck them in, you move further from the person you were meant to be. So you must begin to notice when the air gets thinner around you. Pay attention to the moments when your joy feels heavy, when your choices feel like they require emotional permission. These are the signals that you're no longer flying freely, that the sky you're in belongs more to someone else's comfort than to your own truth. When you see this clearly, you face the choice. Stay in the beautiful cage, convincing yourself it's enough, or step into the open air, even if it means facing turbulence at first. For you, Sagittarius, the choice will always come down to this. Do you want to live admired for your light, or free to let it blaze without restraint? Gate 3. When love becomes permission to exist. There is a subtle but devastating shift that can happen in a relationship. The moment when love is no longer the space where you are free to be yourself, but a place where you feel you must earn the right to exist as you are. For Sagittarius, this change can be so gradual that you don't notice it until it's already shaped your entire way of living. It starts with a single question before making a decision. How will they feel about this? Maybe you don't realize it yet, but that question is the quiet beginning of a much bigger cage. Soon it's no longer just about the big choices, where to live, which job to take, but about the smallest acts of self-expression. You choose your clothes with them in mind. You adjust your laughter so it won't be too much. You share your dreams in smaller doses, carefully edited, so they won't feel threatened. The tragedy is that this doesn't happen because you've stopped loving yourself. It happens because you've started prioritizing their comfort over your freedom. And because Sagittarius loves deeply and loyally, you convince yourself this is what devotion looks like. You tell yourself it's respect. You tell yourself it's compromise. But compromise, when it silences your truth, is not love. It's submission. I once spoke with a Sagittarius named Mara, a brilliant musician whose life revolved around creating and performing. When she met her partner, he was charmed by her talent, telling her he admired her passion. But over time, she began to notice how his mood shifted after her late-night gigs. He didn't forbid her from performing, but he would make small remarks about missing her, or how tired she must be, or how late it was when she came home. At first she brushed it off. But slowly, she began saying no to opportunities, not because she didn't want them, but because she didn't want to face the quiet disappointment in his eyes. I realized one day that I hadn't played in front of an audience for almost a year, Mara told me. It wasn't because there weren't opportunities. It was because every time one came up, I asked myself, will he be okay with it? And somewhere along the way, that question became more important than, do I want this? Sagittarius, love should never make you doubt whether you're allowed to live fully. In a healthy relationship, your joy is not a burden to the other person. It's a gift they cherish. Your expansion is not a threat. It's a source of pride. They don't measure your worth by how much you accommodate them. They measure their love by how much they can stand beside you as you grow. The danger of living as though you need permission is that it rewrites the way you see yourself. You stop believing in your right to pursue what lights you up without justification. And the more you internalize this, the harder it becomes to even remember what you wanted before you started editing yourself. Sometimes the person you're with doesn't even realize the effect they're having. They may believe they're being loving, protective, or practical. But whether intentional or not, the result is the same. You live in a constant negotiation with your own soul, and your dreams are always at the mercy of someone else's approval. The truth is, Sagittarius, you were not born to seek permission to exist. You were born to blaze across the sky in your own right. Any love worth keeping will understand that your light shines not in competition with theirs, but in harmony. And if your growth makes them uncomfortable, that discomfort is theirs to address, not yours to resolve by becoming smaller. Mara eventually reclaimed her music. It wasn't easy. She had to confront the fact that she had been waiting for permission that was never hers to need. She started booking small gigs again, not asking if he was okay with it, but simply letting him know what she'd decided. She told me that each time she stepped on stage, she felt like she was returning to herself piece by piece. And that's the heart of it. Love that makes you ask for permission to exist isn't love. It's a slow erasure of the self. The moment you stop asking and start choosing for yourself is the moment you begin to breathe again. Because Sagittarius, your freedom is not negotiable. The right person will never ask you to trade it for their comfort. The right love will never require you to shrink so they can feel tall. And the right relationship will never confuse your brilliance for a threat. It will see it for what it is, the very reason they fell in love with you in the first place. Gate 4. Taking back your wings. The moment of awakening rarely comes as a dramatic explosion. More often it arrives quietly, like the soft but undeniable awareness that something essential is missing. For Sagittarius, that missing piece is almost always your freedom. You may not be able to name the exact moment it slipped away, but one day you notice the absence. You feel it when you look at your calendar and see nothing that truly excites you. You hear it in your own voice when it no longer carries the same spark. You catch it in the mirror when your eyes seem a little less alive. This is the moment when the truth lands. You've been living in a beautiful cage. And while it may have been lined with kindness, affection, and shared memories, it has still kept you from flying as you were meant to. The decision to take back your wings is not about rejecting love. It's about rejecting the kind of love that asks you to disappear in order to stay. It's about remembering that the real measure of a relationship isn't how safe it makes you feel when you're small, but how supported you feel when you're at your most expansive. I think of a Sagittarius man named Leo who told me about his own awakening. He had been with his partner for years, and they shared a deep affection. But he realized he hadn't pursued any of his personal goals in a long time. Every idea he had, starting a small travel business, running a marathon, learning a new language, seemed to get met with a hesitant frown or a quiet, "Are you sure that's a good idea?" So he stopped mentioning them. And then he stopped dreaming altogether. One morning, Leo was flipping through an old journal and found a list of places he'd wanted to visit before he turned 40. He noticed that not a single one had been crossed off. He was 38. "It wasn't anger that hit me," he told me. "It was grief. Grief for the years I'd been clipping my own wings because I didn't want her to feel left behind." Sagittarius, reclaiming your wings doesn't necessarily mean walking away from the person you love. Sometimes it does, but other times it means having the courage to tell the truth. I can't keep living smaller just to make you feel comfortable. It means setting boundaries, not to push someone out, but to make space for both of you to grow. It means making choices based on your own compass, even when they cause ripples. And yes, this choice can be uncomfortable, because it may mean facing the fear that your expansion will change the relationship forever. But here's what you must trust. Any bond worth keeping will adapt to your growth. Those who truly love you will not see your wings as a threat. They will see them as part of what makes you extraordinary. Taking back your wings starts small. You say yes to an opportunity without over-explaining. You bring up your ideas without gauging their reaction first. You take a trip you've been dreaming of, even if they don't want to come along. You let yourself shine fully in a room without dimming your light to match theirs. And with each act of reclamation, you feel more like yourself again, more whole, more alive. It's important to remember, this is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's restoration. You are not abandoning love. You are abandoning the conditions that made love feel like permission instead of partnership. And in doing so, you're creating the only kind of love that can last. One that allows both people to stand fully in their truth. Leo eventually took that long-delayed trip. His partner was nervous about it, and there were tense conversations before he left. But when he returned, something had shifted. He was lighter, more vibrant, more present. "I think she saw for the first time that my happiness wasn't a threat to her," he said. "It actually made me more loving, because I wasn't carrying the quiet resentment of being held back." Sagittarius, your wings are not an accessory. They are your essence. Without them, you might survive, but you will not thrive. And the world doesn't just want you to survive. It needs you to thrive, because your light, your courage, your boundless spirit are what inspire others to rise as well. So when you feel that quiet recognition that you've been living too small, don't ignore it. Don't wait for permission. The sky is waiting, and so is the version of you who has been patient long enough. Take back your wings. Fly toward the life that feels like yours. And trust that those meant to love you will find you there, not to clip your feathers but to soar beside you. Conclusion: leaving the silk cage. Sagittarius, no one is born to live in a cage. No matter how soft its lining, no matter how warm the hands that built it, a beautiful cage is still a cage. And a love that requires you to fold your wings is not love that will let you soar. The truth you've uncovered is this: love should not survive at the expense of your joy, your dreams, or your light. When you step out, you are not abandoning love. You are abandoning the conditions that kept you from being fully yourself. You are not choosing loneliness, you are choosing truth. And with that truth comes a kind of freedom that feels like breathing fresh air after years of holding your breath. As you walk into the open sky, you carry your light unhidden, unedited. And something remarkable happens. The right people begin to find you. Not to contain you, not to ask you to dim, but to fly beside you through the vast horizon. They will love you not despite your wings, but because of them. This is the gift of leaving the silk cage. You reclaim the space to grow without fear, to laugh without hesitation, to live without asking permission. And once you've tasted that, you'll never again settle for love that makes you small. If this message has stirred something in you, let it be the first step toward your own sky. Like this video so it can reach others who need it, share it with someone who's forgotten their wings, and subscribe to walk this path together. The world is wide, Sagittarius, and your flight has only just begun.